Former President Jacob Zuma appearing in court this morning. A little bit of legal discussion between the lawyers. Been agreed he'll appear in court in Pietermaritzburg in September. No date has yet been set for his corruption trial to start. But the arrest warrant that was issued following his failure to appear in court earlier this year has now been completely withdrawn. Dr. Mathekga is a political analyst. He joins us now. Dr. Mathekga, good afternoon to you. In a strange way, this seems slightly subdued. There was a time when, if Jacob Zuma was in court, the entire country would have been consumed by this. Now, it doesn't seem to have quite the same power.
Good evening, Stephen. Thank you so much for inviting me. Good evening to your viewers as well. I think it is quite observable there, Stephen, that the ground has shifted beneath President Jacob Zuma's feet. I mean, earlier on when he appeared on these matters, people used to support him, but now you don't see people. But, Stephen, we're also talking about extraordinary circumstances here. Who would have predicted that by the time President Jacob Zuma's trial gets underway, it will be prohibited for people to gather generally? I mean, this has got nothing, the regulations that are currently underway have got nothing to do with his trial. It all says to him that you cannot have the support that you used to have. So these are very difficult circumstances for him, extraordinary circumstances. But again, Stephen, we are still at a procedure level about this trial here. We have not even entered the substantive matters. They said that they are going to be back in the court on the 8th of September to determine the readiness and so forth. We are still at procedure. Years down the line, you have not begun hearing the substantive matter dispute here. That is the charges of corruption.
The legal maneuvering that we've seen in court, I mean, it's about complex legal matters, right? The lawyers all arguing in front of a judge is what they're paid to do. Is it also about what's happening in the public domain? Is this a little bit about the court of public opinion, public sentiment?
Well, everybody's watching this trial, Stephen. When it gets to start, when people start hearing the substantive matters, I would imagine that other, even international news network will certainly carry some aspect of the trial. It is the trial that is very contentious. I mean, President Jacob Zuma outlived this thing while he was in his presidency, outlived this thing. He served 2 terms, and before he became the president, some said that he was supposed to face that trial, but he survived presidency twice, and still the charges are still lingering. So it is of great interest. It has politicized South Africa. And some actually would say that, look, you cannot have this trial. You cannot put President Jacob Zuma on trial without putting the ANC on trial. Certainly the party might have to be painted in a bad light here.
Well, there's so many interesting questions to ask around the ANC on this. So yesterday, President Zuma, former Minister of Mineral Resources, he was on Newsfeed talking to us on Newsroom Africa. He said that he was supporting the former President Jacob Zuma. He said it to me that he is Zuma and Zuma is him. You'll have heard that phrase before, using the phrase Msholozi as well. And yet, I don't think everyone in the ANC will share that sentiment. Does this put the sort of the pressure on possible divisions in the party, or is that overplayed nowadays?
I mean, Stephen, for people to even come out now and speak in those terms that you are referring to, Museveni is an MP, to say that he supports Zuma, he's Zuma and so forth, I mean, they continuously sound like outliers. These are no longer the message that you find at the center of the ANC. Once in a while, you hear someone coming out within the ANC talking about this kind of support, but you cannot say this kind of sentiments are overwhelmingly there within the ANC. The support is dwindling, but it doesn't mean you are not going to find people such as Museveni coming out and had stated their support. Things have changed. The ANC has got much more serious problems than Jacob Zuma. The biggest problem with the ANC is how to manage a modern state, how to deal with unemployment. Those, for me, are much more serious, genuine concerns that do not allow time to concern with Zuma, actually.
It's fascinating, Ralph, how quickly things have changed. I mean, you'll remember, I was in the hall at the time when former President Jacob Zuma spoke as still president of the country, December 2017, at the Nasrec conference. I mean, it was an electric atmosphere. He started to sing Umshimi Wam. I mean, every single person in that hall was moving to the music. Now, maybe 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 or 4 people from the ANC are showing their support for him in public?
Politicians are always calculating, Stephen. People don't enter into politics just because they love the people and so forth. It is also about survival. It is about ensuring that their political fortunes are secure. So in a situation such as this, it becomes nonsensical to keep on investing in President Jacob Zuma. Even those who are doing it probably is because of the emotional guilt and so forth. But people are changing position. People are bargaining. People are looking into the future, and that future certainly does not involve President Jacob Zuma. So it changes very fast. It has not been a long time indeed when we had President Jacob Zuma speaking. He used to use the state platforms. Today he has to Zoom. He knows how to Zoom. I struggle with how to Zoom, Stephen. That is a change of things indeed.
Well, Ralph, maybe it helps to have a son to teach you. I do need to ask, you mentioned that this could put the ANC on trial, and in a way we've seen evidence of this before during the Zondo Commission of Inquiry into State Capture. The ANC has always said that it's not on trial, and in a way that is true. But in another way, most of the people that we've seen testimony against involve people who are deployed by the ANC. Does this really put the ANC on trial? Some of what happened so long ago. I mean, these charges go back to Shabir Sheikh. He was convicted in 2005 about things, some of them happened actually before the year 2000. I mean, that's a long, long time ago now.
It's a long time ago, Stephen, but we know that we have not fully uncovered actually the arms deal. We have had an investigation. If my memory serves me very well, I think it was a Security Commission which came out with a report on the arms deal saying there was nothing wrong with that. And if I recall very well, Stephen, as well here, there are some government, non-government organizations that are taking up that report on review in court. So the issue is not totally sealed. And this is the big issue that the ANC as government presided upon. And if the levers of power, I think if the negligence started, it started right with the arms deal. It is the biggest mega project that the ANC-led government actually decided upon. So certainly you're going to have to bring the party on trial here. And again, Stephen, there are this insinuation that keeps on coming out from the corner of President Jacob Zuma that he was acting in the interest of the party and so forth. It's more like he does not see himself as being accused as just an individual here. He sees himself as someone who was acting within an institution. So we're talking about the party, we're talking about government institution. It's about the interface between the party and government institution. And certainly, unfortunately for the ANC, it will be painted in bad light.
Do you agree with Protus Madlala? He spoke to us yesterday on Newsfeed. He said that this was a big moment for the country in the case of a former president actually appearing in court on charges of corruption. Is this a big moment for democracy in South Africa?
Oh, it is actually a demonstration of democracy at work here in South Africa. I mean, this is the former president who is appearing. And when I'm talking about former president, this is not someone who has been out of power for 5 years or so. We're talking about 2 years or so since President Jacob Zuma has been in power. So it actually says that South Africa's law, it applies without favor, without consideration as to how powerful someone is. And again, some will say that this trial should have been held far back. But no doubt about it, it is a demonstration of the rule of law. And this is not about President Jacob Zuma being found guilty or not guilty. Of course, he's entitled to his defense, and therefore the state should prove beyond reasonable doubt. But most importantly, it's about that a person of that stature can be subjected to that without the state falling apart. For me, it's an indication of democracy and a strength of democracy.